Chapter 11. I stared at the man, clutching the brow and rocking on my base. Off? Yes. Your wedding? Yes. It's off? Yes. What? Off? Yes. I don't know what the Mona Lisa would have done in my place. Probably just what I did. Jeeves, I said. Brandy. Very good, sir. He rolled away on his errand of mercy, and I turned to Gussie, who was tacking about the room in a dazed manner, as if filling in the time before starting to pluck straws from his hair. "I can't bear it," I heard him mutter. "Life without Madeline wouldn't be worth living." It was an astounding attitude, of course, but you can't argue about fellows' tastes. One man's peach is another man's poison, and vice versa. Even my Aunt Agatha, I remembered, had roused the red-hot spark of pash in the late Spencer Gregson. His wanderings had taken him to the bed, and I saw that he was looking at the knotted sheet which lay there. "I suppose," he said in an absent, soliloquizing voice, "a chap could hang himself with that." I resolved to put a stopper on this trend of thought promptly. I got more or less used by now to my bedroom being treated as a sort of meeting place of the nations, but I was dashed if I was going to have it turned into the spot marked with an X. It was a point on which I felt strongly. "You aren't going to hang yourself here." "I shall have to hang myself somewhere." "Well, you don't hang yourself in my bedroom." He raised his eyebrows. "Have you any objection to my sitting in your armchair?" "Go ahead." "Thanks." He seated himself and stared before him with glazed eyes. "Now then, Gussie," I said, "I will take your statement. What's all this rot about the wedding being off?" "It's off." "But didn't you show her the notebook?" "Yes, I showed her the notebook." "Did she read its contents?" "Yes." "Well, didn't she tout comprendre?" "Yes." "And tout pardonner?" "Yes." "Then you must have got your facts twisted. The wedding can't be off." "It is, I tell you. Do you think I don't know when a wedding's off and when it isn't? Sir Watkin has forbidden it." This was an angle I hadn't foreseen. "Why? Did you have a row or something?" "Yes, about newts. He didn't like me putting them in the bath." "You put newts in the bath?" "Yes." Like a keen cross-examining counsel, I swooped on the point. "Why?" His hand fluttered as if about to reach for a straw. "I broke the tank in my bedroom, the glass tank I keep my newts in. I broke the glass tank in my bedroom, and the bath was the only place to lodge the newts. The basin wasn't large enough. Newts need elbow room, so I put them in the bath, because I'd broken the glass tank in my bedroom, the glass tank I keep my—" I saw that if allowed to continue in this strain he might go on practically indefinitely, so I called him to order with a sharp rap of a china vase on the mantelpiece. "I get the idea," I said, brushing the fragments into the fireplace. "Proceed. How does Pop Bassett come into the picture?" "Maybe he went to take a bath. It never occurred to me that anyone would be taking a bath as late as this, and I was in the drawing-room when he burst in shouting, 'Madeline, that blasted Finknottle has been filling my bathtub with tadpoles,' and I lost my head a little, I'm afraid. I yelled, 'Oh, my gosh, you silly old ass, be careful what you're doing with those newts. Don't touch them. I'm in the middle of a most important experiment.'" "I see. And then?" "I went on to tell him how I wished to ascertain whether the full moon affected the love life of newts. And a strange look came into his face, and he quivered a bit, and then he told me that he'd pulled out the plug, and all my newts had gone down the waste-pipe." I think he'd have preferred at this point to fling himself on the bed and turn his face to the wall, but I headed him off. I was resolved to stick to the race. "Upon which you did what?" I ticked him off properly. I called him every name I could think of. In fact, I called him names that I hadn't a notion I knew. They just seemed to come bubbling up from my subconscious. I was hampered a bit at first by the fact that Madeline was there, but it wasn't long before he told her to go to bed, and then I was really able to express myself. And when I finally paused for breath, he forbade the banns and pushed off. And I rang the bell and asked Butterfield to bring me a glass of orange juice. I started. Orange juice? I wanted picking up. But orange juice? At such a time? It was what I felt I needed. I shrugged my shoulders. "Oh, well," I said. "Just another proof, of course, of what I often say, that it takes all sorts to make a world. As a matter of fact, I could do with a good long drink now. The tooth bottle is at your elbow. Thanks. Ah, that's the stuff. Have a go at the jug. No, thanks, I know when to stop. Well, that's the position, Bertie. He won't let Madeline marry me, and I'm wondering if there's any possible way of bringing him around. I'm afraid there isn't. You see, it wasn't only that I called him names. Such as, well, Louse, I remember, was one of them, and Skunk, I think. Yes, I'm pretty sure I called him a wall-eyed skunk, but he might forgive me that. The real trouble is that I mocked at that cow-creamer of his." "Cow-creamer?" I spoke sharply. He had started a train of thought. An idea had begun to burgeon. For some little time I had been calling on all the resources of the Wooster intellect to help me to solve this problem, and I don't often do that without something breaking loose. At this mention of the cow-creamer, the brain seemed suddenly to give itself a shake and start off across country with its nose to the ground. Yes, knowing how much he loved and admired it, and searching for barbed words that would wound him, I told him it was modern Dutch. I'd gathered from his remarks at the dinner-table last night that that was the last thing it ought to be. "You and your 18th-century cow-creamers," I said. "Pah, modern Dutch," or words to that effect. The thrust got home, he turned purple and broke off the wedding. "Listen, Gussie," I said, "I think I've got it." His face lit up. I could see that optimism had stirred and was shaking a leg. This Finknottle has always been of an optimistic nature. Those who recall his address to the boys of Market Snodsbury Grammar School will remember that it was largely an appeal to the little blighters not to look on the dark side. "Yes, I believe I see the way. What you've got to do, Gussie, is pinch the cow-creamer." His lips parted, and I thought an "eh, what?" was coming through, but it didn't. Just silence and a couple of bubbles. "That's the first essential step. Having secured the cow-creamer, you tell him it's in your possession and say, 'Now how about it?' I feel convinced that in order to recover that foul cow, he would meet any terms you care to name. You know what collectors are like, practically potty, every one of them. Why, my Uncle Tom wants the thing so badly that he's actually prepared to yield up his supreme cook, Anatole, in exchange for it." "Not the fellow who was functioning at Brinkley when I was there?" "That's right. The chap who dished up those nonettes de poulet Agnès Sorel?" "That very artist." "You really mean that your uncle would consider Anatole well lost if he could secure this cow-creamer?" "I have it from Aunt Dahlia's own lips." He drew a deep breath. "Then you're right. This scheme of yours would certainly solve everything, assuming, of course, that Sir Watkin values the thing equally highly." "He does, doesn't he, Jeeves?" I said, putting it up to him as he trickled in with the brandy. "Sir Watkin Bassett has forbidden Gussie's wedding," I explained. "And I've been telling him that all he has to do in order to make him change his mind is to get hold of that cow-creamer and refuse to give it back until he coughs up a father's blessing. You concur?" "Undoubtedly, sir. If Mr. Finknottle possesses himself of the objet d'art in question, he will be in a position to dictate a very shrewd plan, sir." "Thank you, Jeeves. Yes, not bad, considering that I had to think on my feet and form my strategy at a moment's notice. If I were you, Gussie, I'd put things in train immediately." "Excuse me, sir. You spoke, Jeeves?" "Yes, sir. I was about to say that before Mr. Finknottle can put the arrangements in operation, there is an obstacle to be surmounted." "What's that?" "In order to protect his interests, Sir Watkin has posted Constable Oates on guard in the collection room." "What?" "Yes, sir." The sunshine died out of Gussie's face, and he uttered a stricken sound, like a gramophone record running down. "However, I think that with a little finesse it will be perfectly possible to eliminate this factor. I wonder if you recollect, sir, that occasion at Chuffnell Hall when Sir Roderick Glossop had become locked up in the potting shed, and your efforts to release him appeared likely to be foiled by the fact that Police Constable Dobson had been stationed outside the door?" "Vividly, Jeeves." I ventured to suggest that it might be possible to induce him to leave his post by conveying word to him that the parlour-maid Mary, to whom he was betrothed, wished to confer with him in the raspberry bushes. The plan was put into effect and proved successful. "True, Jeeves, but," I said dubiously, "I don't see how anything like that could be worked here. Constable Dobson, you'll recall, was young, ardent, romantic, just the sort of chap who'd automatically go leaping into raspberry bushes if you told him there were girls there. Eustace Oates has none of the Dobson fire. He's well stricken in years and gives the impression of being a settled married man who'd rather have a cup of tea." "Yes, sir. Constable Oates is, as you say, of a more sober temperament. But it's merely the principle of the thing which I would advocate applying to the present emergency. It would be necessary to provide a lure suited to the psychology of the individual. What I would suggest is that Mr. Finknottle should inform the officer that he's seen his helmet in your possession." "Egad, Jeeves!" "Yes, sir." "I see the idea. Yes, very hot. Yes, that would do it." Gussie's glassy eye indicating that all this was failing to register, I explained. "Earlier in the evening, Gussie, a hidden hand snitched this gendarme's lid, cutting him to the quick. What Jeeves is saying is that a word from you to the effect that you've seen it in my room will bring him bounding up here like a tigress after its lost cub, thus leaving you a clear field in which to operate. That's your idea in essence, isn't it, Jeeves?" "Precisely, sir." Gussie brightened visibly. "I see, it's a ruse. That's right, one of the ruses and not the worst of them. Nice work, Jeeves." "Thank you, sir." "That'll do the trick, Gussie. Tell him I've got his helmet, wait while he burns out, nip to the glass case and trouser the cow. A simple program. A child could carry it out. My only regret, Jeeves, is that this appears to remove any chance Aunt Dahlia might have had of getting the thing. A pity there's been such a wide popular demand for it." "Yes, sir. But possibly Mrs. Travers, feeling that Mr. Finknottle's need is greater than hers, will accept the disappointment philosophically." "Possibly. On the other hand, possibly not. Still, there it is. On these occasions when individual interests clash, somebody's got to draw the short straw." "Very true, sir." "You can't be expected to dish out happy endings all round. One per person, I mean." "No, sir. The great thing is to get Gussie fixed. So buzz off, Gussie, and heaven speed your efforts." I lit a cigarette. "A very sound idea, that, Jeeves. How did you happen to think of it?" "It was the officer himself who put it into my head, sir, when I was chatting with him not long ago. I gathered from what he said that he actually does suspect you of being the individual who purloined his helmet." "Me? Why on earth? Dash it, I scarcely know the man. I thought he suspected Stiffy." "Originally, yes, sir, and it's still his view that Miss Byng was the motivating force behind the theft. But he now believes that the young lady must have had a male accomplice who did the rough work. Sir Watkin, I understand, supports him in this theory." I suddenly remembered the opening passages of my interview with Pop Bassett in the library, and at last got on to what he'd been driving at. Those remarks of his, which had seemed to me then mere idle gossip, had I now perceived a sinister undercurrent of meaning. I had supposed that we were just two of the boys chewing over the latest bit of hot news, and all the time the thing had been a probe or quiz. But what makes them think that I was the male accomplice? "I gather that the officer was struck by the cordiality which he saw to exist between Miss Byng and yourself when he encountered you in the road this afternoon, and his suspicions became strengthened when he found the young lady's glove on the scene of the outrage." "I don't get you, Jeeves." "He supposes you to be enamoured of Miss Byng, sir, and thinks that you were wearing her glove next your heart." "If it had been next my heart, how could I have dropped it?" "His view is that you took it out to press to your lips, sir." Come, Jeeves. Would I start pressing gloves to my lips at the moment when I was about to pinch a policeman's helmet?" "Apparently Mr. Pinker did, sir." I was on the point of explaining to him that what old Stinker would do in any given situation and what the ordinary normal person with a couple of ounces more brain than a cuckoo clock would do were two vastly different things, when I was interrupted by the re-entrance of Gussie. I could see by the buoyancy of his demeanour that matters had been progressing well. "Jeeves was right, Bertie," he said. "He read Eustace Oates like a book. The information stirred him up. I don't think I've ever seen a more thoroughly roused policeman. His first impulse was to drop everything and come dashing up here right away. Why didn't he? He couldn't quite bring himself to, in view of the fact that Sir Watkin had told him to stay there." I followed the psychology. It was the same as that of the boy who stood on the burning deck, whence all but he had fled. "Then the procedure, I take it, will be that he'll send word to Pop Bassett, notifying him of the facts and asking permission to go ahead?" "Yes, I expect you'll have him with you in a few minutes." "Then you ought not to be here. You should be lurking in the hall." "I'm going there at once. I only came to report." "Be ready to slip in the moment he's gone." "I will, trust me. There won't be a hitch. It was a wonderful idea of yours, Jeeves." "Thank you, sir." "You can imagine how relieved I'm feeling, knowing that in about 5 minutes everything will be all right. The only thing I'm a bit sorry for now," said Gussie thoughtfully, "is that I gave the old boy that notebook." He threw out this appalling statement so casually that it was a second or two before I got its import. When I did, a powerful shock permeated my system. It was as if I'd been reclining in the electric chair and the authorities had turned on the juice. "You gave him the notebook?" "Yes, just to say he was leaving. I thought there might be some names in it which I'd forgotten to call him." I supported myself with a trembling hand on the mantelpiece. "Jeeves?" "Sir." "More brandy." "Yes, sir. And stop doling it out in those small glasses as if it were radium. Bring the cask." Gussie was regarding me with a touch of surprise. "Something the matter, Bertie?" "Something the matter?" I let out a mirthless "Ha! Well, this has torn it." "How do you mean? Why?" "Can't you see what you've done, you poor chump? It's no use pinching that cow creamer now. If old Bassett has read the contents of that notebook, nothing will bring him around." "Why not?" "Well, you saw how they affected Spode. I don't suppose Pop Bassett is any fonder of reading home truths about himself than Spode is." "But he's had the home truths already. I told you how I ticked him off." "Yes, but you could have got away with that. Overlook it, please. Spoken in hot blood. Strangely forgot myself. All that sort of stuff. Coldly reasoned opinions, carefully inscribed day by day in a notebook, are a very different thing." I saw that it had penetrated at last. The greenish tinge was back in his face. His mouth opened and shut like that of a goldfish, which sees another goldfish nip in and get away with the ant's egg which it had been earmarking for itself. "Oh, gosh." "Yes." "What can I do?" "I don't know." "Think, Bertie, think." I did so, tensely, and was rewarded with an idea. "Tell me," I said, "what exactly occurred at the conclusion of the vulgar brawl? You handed him the book? Did he dip into it on the spot?" "No, he shoved it away in his pocket." "And did you gather that he still intended to take a bath?" "Yes." "Then answer me this. What pocket? I mean, the pocket of what garment? What was he wearing?" A dressing gown." "Over, think carefully, think Nuttall, for everything hangs on this, over shirt and trousers and things?" Yes, he had his trousers on, I remember noticing." "Then there's still hope. After leaving you, he would have gone to his room to shed the upholstery. He was pretty well steamed up, you say?" "Oh, yes, very much." "Good. My knowledge of human nature, Gussie, tells me that a steamed-up man does not loiter about feeling in his pocket for notebooks and steeping himself in the contents. He flings off the garments and legs it to the salle de bain. The book must still be in the pocket of his dressing gown, which, no doubt, he flung on the bed or over a chair, and all you have to do is nip into his room and get it." I had anticipated that this clear thinking would produce the joyous cry and the heartfelt burst of thanks, instead of which he merely shuffled his feet dubiously. "Nip into his room?" "Yes." "But, dash it, now what? You're sure there isn't some other way?" "Of course there isn't." "I see. You wouldn't care to do it for me, Bertie?" "No, I would not." "Many fellows would, to help an old school friend." "Many fellows are mugs." "Have you forgotten those days at the dear old school?" "Yes." You don't remember the time I shared my last bar of milk chocolate with you? No. Well, I did. And you told me then that if ever you had an opportunity of doing anything for me... However, if these obligations sacred, some people might consider them, have no weight with you, I suppose there's nothing more to be said." He pottered about for a while, doing the old cat-in-an-adage stuff. Then, taking from his breast pocket a cabinet photograph of Madeline Bassett, he gazed at it intently. It seemed to be the bracer he required. His eyes lit up. His face lost its fish-like look. He strode out, to return immediately, slamming the door behind him. "I say, Bertie, Spode's out there." "What of it?" "He made a grab at me." "Made a grab at you?" I frowned. I am a patient man, but I can be pushed too far. It seemed incredible, after what I'd said to him, that Roderick Spode's hat was still in the ring. I went to the door and threw it open. It was, even as Gussie had said, the man was lurking. He sagged a bit as he saw me. I addressed him with cold severity. "Anything I can do for you, Spode?" No, nothing, thanks." "Push along, Gussie," I said, and stood watching him with a protective eye as he sidled around the human gorilla and disappeared along the passage. Then I turned to Spode. "Spode," I said, in a level voice, "did I or did I not tell you to leave Gussie alone?" He looked at me pleadingly. "Couldn't you possibly see a way to letting me do something to him, Wooster? If it was only to kick his spine up through his hat?" "Certainly not." "Well, just as you say, of course." He scratched his cheek discontentedly. "Did you read that notebook, Wooster?" "No." "He says my moustache is like the faint discoloured smear left by a squashed black beetle on the side of a kitchen sink." "He always was a poetic sort of chap." "And that the way I eat asparagus alters one's whole conception of man as nature's last word." "Yes, he told me that, I remember. He's about right, too. I was noticing at dinner. What you want to do, Spode, in future is lower the vegetable gently into the abyss. Take it easy. Don't snap at it. Try to remember that you are a human being and not a shark." "Ha ha, a human being and not a shark. Cleverly put, Wooster, most amusing." He was still chuckling, though not frightfully heartily, I thought, when Jeeves came along with a decanter on a tray. "The brandy, sir." "And about time, Jeeves." "Yes, sir. I must once more apologize for my delay. I was detained by Constable Oates." "Oh, chatting with him again?" "Not so much chatting, sir, as staunching the flow of blood." "Blood?" "Yes, sir. The officer had met with an accident." My momentary pique vanished, and in its place there came a stern joy. Life at Totley Towers had hardened me, blunting the gentler emotions, and I derived nothing but gratification from the news that Constable Oates had been meeting with accidents. Only one thing indeed could have pleased me more, if I'd been informed that Sir Watkin Bassett had trodden on the soap and come a perler in the bathtub. How did it happen? "He was assaulted while endeavouring to recover Sir Watkin's cow-creamer from a midnight marauder, sir." Spode uttered a cry. "The cow-creamer hasn't been stolen?" "Yes, sir." It was evident that Roderick Spode was deeply affected by the news. His attitude towards the cow-creamer had, if you remember, been fatherly from the first. Not lingering to hear more, he galloped off, and I accompanied Jeeves into the room, agog for details. "What happened, Jeeves?" "Well, sir, it was a little difficult to extract a coherent narrative from the officer, but I gather that he found himself restless and fidgety. No doubt owing to his inability to get in touch with Pop Bassett, who, as we know, is in his bath and received permission to leave his post and come up here after his helmet. No doubt, sir. And being restless, he experienced a strong desire to smoke a pipe. Reluctant, however, to run the risk of being found to have smoked while on duty, as might have been the case had he done so in an enclosed room where the fumes would have lingered, he stepped out into the garden." A quick thinker, this Oates. "He left the French window open behind him, and some little time later his attention was arrested by a sudden sound from within." What sort of sound? The sound of stealthy footsteps, sir. Someone stepping stealthily, as it were? Precisely, sir. Followed by the breaking of glass. He immediately hastened back to the room, which was, of course, in darkness. Why? Because he had turned the light out, sir. I nodded. I followed the idea. Sir Watkins' instructions to him had been to keep his vigil in the dark, in order to convey to a marauder the impression that the room was unoccupied. I nodded again. It was a dirty trick, but one which would spring naturally to the mind of an ex-magistrate. He hurried to the case in which the cow creamer had been deposited, and struck a match. This almost immediately went out, but not before he'd been able to ascertain that the objet d'art had disappeared, and he was still in the process of endeavouring to adjust himself to the discovery when he heard a movement, and turning, perceived a dim figure stealing out through the French window. He pursued it into the garden, and was overtaking it, and might shortly have succeeded in effecting an arrest, when there sprang from the darkness a dim figure. The same dim figure? No, sir, another one. A big night for dim figures. Yes, sir. Better call them Pat and Mike, or we shall be getting mixed. A and B, perhaps, sir? If you prefer it, Jeeves. He was overtaking dim figure A, you say, when dim figure B sprang from the darkness, and struck him upon the nose. I uttered an exclamation. The thing was a mystery no longer. Old Stinker! Yes, sir. No doubt Miss Byng inadvertently forgot to apprise him that there'd been a change in the evening's arrangements. And he was lurking there waiting for me? So one would be disposed to imagine, sir. I inhaled deeply, my thoughts playing about the constable's injured beezer. There I was feeling, but for whatever it is, went Bertie Wooster, as the fellow said. This assault diverted the officer's attention, and the object of his pursuit was enabled to escape. What became of Stinker? On becoming aware of the officer's identity, he apologized, sir. He then withdrew. I don't blame him. A pretty good idea at that. Well, I don't know what to make of this, Jeeves, this dim figure. I'm referring to dim figure A. Who could it have been? Had Oates any views on the subject? Very definite views, sir. He is convinced that it was you. I stared. Me? Why the dickens is everything that happens in this ghastly house got to be me? And it is his intention, as soon as he's able to secure Sir Watkins' cooperation, to proceed here and search your room. He was going to do that anyway, for the helmet. Yes, sir. I couldn't help smiling. The thing tickled me. This is going to be rather funny, Jeeves. It'll be entertaining to watch these two blighters ferret about, feeling sillier and sillier asses as each moment goes by and they find nothing. Most diverting, sir. And when the search is over, and they're standing there, baffled, stammering out weak apologies, I shall get a bit of my own back. I shall fold my arms and draw myself up to my full height. There came from without the hoofbeats of a galloping relative, and Aunt Dahlia whizzed in. "Here, shove this away somewhere, young Bertie," she panted, seeming touched in the wind. And so saying, she thrust the cow creamer into my hands. Chapter 12. In my recent picture of Sir Watkin Bassett reeling beneath the blow of hearing that I wanted to marry into his family, I compared his garglings, if you remember, to the death rattle of a dying duck. I might now have been this duck's twin brother, equally stricken. For some moments I stood there, quacking feebly. Then, with a powerful effort of the will, I pulled myself together and cheesed the bird imitation. I looked at Jeeves. He looked at me. I didn't speak, save with the language of the eyes, but his trained senses enabled him to read my thoughts unerringly. "Thank you, Jeeves." I took the tumbler from him and lowered perhaps half an ounce of the raw spirit. Then, the dizzy spell overcome, I transferred my gaze to the aged relative who was taking an easy in the armchair. It's pretty generally admitted, both in the Drones Club and elsewhere, that Bertie Wooster, in his dealings with the opposite sex, invariably shows himself a man of the nicest chivalry. What you sometimes hear described as a parfait gentil knight. It's true that at the age of 6, when the blood ran hot, I once gave my nurse a juicy one over the top knot with a porringer, but the lapse was merely a temporary one. Since then, though few men have been more sorely tried by the sex, I've never raised a hand against a woman, and I can give no better indication of my emotions at this moment than by saying that, preux chevalier though I am, I came within the veriest toucher of hauling off and letting a revered aunt have it on the side of the head with a papier-mâché elephant, the only object on the mantelpiece which the fierce rush of life at Totley Towers had left still unbroken. She, while this struggle was proceeding in my bosom, was at her chirpiest. Her breath recovered, she'd begun to prattle with a carefree gaiety which cut me like a knife. It was obvious from her demeanour that, stringing along with the late Diamond, she little knew what she had done. "As nice a run," she was saying, "as I've had since the last time I was out with the Barks and Bucks. Not a check from start to finish. Good, clean British sport at its best. It was a close thing, though, Bertie. I could feel that cop's hot breath on the back of my neck. If a posse of curates hadn't popped out of a trap and lent a willing hand at precisely the right moment, he'd have got me. Well, God bless the clergy, say I, fine body of men, but what on earth were policemen doing on the premises? Nobody ever mentioned policemen to me." "That was Constable Oates, the vigilant guardian of the peace of Totley and the Wold," I replied, keeping a tight hold on myself, lest I should howl like a banshee and shoot up to the ceiling. Sir Watkin had stationed him in the room to watch over his belongings. He was lying in wait. I was the visitor he expected. "I'm glad you weren't the visitor he got. The situation would have been completely beyond you, my poor lamb. You'd have lost your head and stood there like a stuffed wombat to fall an easy prey. I don't mind telling you that when that man suddenly came in through the window, I myself was for a moment paralyzed. Still, all's well that ends well." I shook a sombre head. "You err, my misguided old object. This is not an end, but a beginning. Pop Bassett is about to spread a dragnet." "Let him." "And when he and the constable come and search this room—" "They wouldn't do that." "They would and will. In the first place, they think the Oates helmet is here. In the second place, it's the officer's view, relayed to me by Jeeves, who had it from him first-hand as he was staunching the flow of blood, that it was I whom he pursued." Her chirpiness waned. I had expected it would. She had been beaming. She beamed no longer. Eyeing her steadily, I saw the native hue of resolution had become sickly dour with the pale cast of thought. This is awkward." "Most." "They find the cow creamer here. It may be a little difficult to explain." She rose and broke the elephant thoughtfully. "The great thing," she said, "is not to lose our heads. We must say to ourselves, what would Napoleon have done? He was the boy in a crisis. He knew his onions. We must do something very clever, very shrewd, which will completely baffle these bounders. Well, come on. I'm waiting for suggestions." "Mine is that you pop off without delay, taking that beastly car with you." "And run into the search party on the stairs? Not if I know it. Have you any ideas, Jeeves?" "Not at the moment, madam." "You can't produce a guilty secret of Sir Watkins out of the hat as you did with Spode?" "No, madam." "No, I suppose that's too much to ask. Then we've got to hide the thing somewhere, but where? It's the old problem, of course, the one that makes life so tough for murderers. What to do with the body? I suppose the old purloined letter stunt wouldn't work?" "Mrs. Travers is alluding to the well-known story by the late Edgar Allan Poe, sir," said Jeeves, seeing that I wasn't abreast. "It deals with the theft of an important document, and the character who had secured it foiled the police by placing it in full view in a letter rack, his theory being that what is obvious is often overlooked. And no doubt Mrs. Travers wishes to suggest that we deposit the object on the mantelpiece." I laughed a hollow one. "Take a look at the mantelpiece. It's as bare as a wind-swept prairie. Anything placed there would stick out like a sore thumb." "Yes, that's true," Aunt Dahlia was forced to admit. "Put the bally thing in the suitcase, Jeeves." "That's no good. They're bound to look there." "Merely as a palliative," I explained. "I can't stand the sight of it any longer. In with it, Jeeves." "Very good, sir." A silence ensued, and it was just after Aunt Dahlia had broken it to say how about barricading the door and standing a siege that there came from the passage the sound of approaching footsteps. "Here they are," I said. "They seem in a hurry," said Aunt Dahlia. She was correct. These were running footsteps. Jeeves went to the door and looked out. "It's Mr. Finknottle, sir." And the next moment Gussie entered, going strongly. A single glance at him was enough to reveal to the discerning eye that he hadn't been running just for the sake of the exercise. His spectacles were glittering in a hunted sort of way, and there was more than a touch of the fretful porpentine about his hair. "Do you mind if I hide here till the milk train goes, Bertie?" he said. "Under the bed will do. I shan't be in your way." "What's the matter?" "Oh, still better, the knotted sheet. That's the stuff." A snort like a minute gun showed that Aunt Dahlia was in no welcoming mood. "Get out of here, you foul spink bottle," she said curtly. "We're in conference. Bertie, if an aunt's wishes have any weight with you, you'll stamp on this man with both feet and throw him out on his ear." I raised a hand. "Wait! I want to get the strength of this. Stop messing about with those sheets, Gussie, and explain. Is Spode after you again? Because if so—" "Not Spode, Sir Watkin." Aunt Dahlia snorted again, like one giving an encore in response to a popular demand. "Bertie!" I raised another hand. "Half a second, old ancestor. How do you mean Sir Watkin? Why Sir Watkin? What on earth is he chivvying you for?" "He's read the notebook." "What?" "Yes." "Bertie, I'm only a weak woman." I raised a third hand. This was no time for listening to aunts. "Go on, Gussie," I said, dully. He took off his spectacles and wiped them with a trembling handkerchief. You could see that he was a man who had passed through the furnace. "When I left you, I went to his room. The door was ajar, and I crept in, and when I got in, I found that he hadn't gone to have a bath after all. He was sitting on the bed, in his underwear, reading the notebook. He looked up, and our eyes met. You've no notion what a frightful shock he gave me." "Yes, I have. I once had a very similar experience with the Rev. Aubrey Upjohn." There was a long, dreadful pause. Then he uttered a sort of gurgling sound and rose, his face contorted. He made a leap in my direction. I pushed off. He followed. It was neck and neck down the stairs, but as we passed through the hall, he stopped to get a hunting crop, and this enabled me to secure a good lead, which I— "Bertie," said Aunt Dahlia, "I am only a weak woman, but if you won't tread on this insect and throw the remains outside, I shall have to see what I can do. The most tremendous issues hanging in the balance. Our plan of action is still to be decided on, every second of priceless importance, and he comes in here telling us the story of his life. Spink bottle, you ghastly, goggle-eyed piece of gorgonzola, will you hop it or will you not?" There's a compelling force about the old flesh and blood, when stirred, which generally gets her listened to. People have told me that in her hunting days she could make her wishes respected across 2 ploughed fields and a couple of spinneys. The word "not" had left her lips like a high-powered shell, and Gussie, taking it between the eyes, rose some 6 inches into the air. When he returned to terra firma, his manner was apologetic and conciliatory. "Oh, yes, Mrs. Travers, I'm just going, Mrs. Travers. The moment we get the sheet working, Mrs. Travers. If you and Jeeves will just hold this end, Bertie." "You want them to let you down from the window with a sheet?" "Yes, Mrs. Travers. Then I can borrow Bertie's car and drive to London." "It's a long drop." "Oh, not so very, Mrs. Travers." "You may break your neck." "Oh, I don't think so, Mrs. Travers." "But you may," argued Aunt Dahlia. "Come on, Bertie," she said, speaking with real enthusiasm. "Hurry up. Let the man down with the sheet, can't you? What are you waiting for?" I turned to Jeeves. "Ready, Jeeves?" "Yes, sir." He coughed gently. "And perhaps if Mr. Finknottle is driving your car to London, he might take your suitcase with him and leave it at the flat?" I gasped. So did Aunt Dahlia. I stared at him. Aunt Dahlia the same. Our eyes met, and I saw in hers the same reverent awe which I have no doubt she viewed in mine. I was overcome. A moment before, I had been dully conscious that nothing could save me from the soup. Already I'd seemed to hear the beating of its wings. And now this. Aunt Dahlia, speaking of Napoleon, had claimed that he was pretty hot in an emergency, but I was prepared to bet that not even Napoleon could have topped this superb effort. Once more, as so often in the past, the man had rung the bell, and was entitled to the cigar or coconut. "Yes, Jeeves," I said, speaking with some difficulty, "that is true. He might, mightn't he?" "Yes, sir." "You won't mind taking my suitcase, Gussie? If you're borrowing the car, I shall have to go by train. I'm leaving in the morning myself, and it's a nuisance hauling about a lot of luggage." "Of course. Well, we'll just loose you down on the sheet and drop the suitcase after you. All set, Jeeves?" "Yes, sir." "Then upsy-daisy." I don't think I've ever assisted at a ceremony which gave such universal pleasure to all concerned. The sheet didn't split, which pleased Gussie. Nobody came to interrupt us, which pleased me. And when I dropped the suitcase, it hit Gussie on the head, which delighted Aunt Dahlia. As for Jeeves, one could see that the faithful fellow was tickled pink at having been able to cluster round and save the young master in his hour of peril. His motto is service. The stormy emotions through which I'd been passing had not unnaturally left me weak, and I was glad when Aunt Dahlia, after a powerful speech in which she expressed her gratitude to our preserver in well-phrased terms, said that she would hop along and see what was going on in the enemy's camp. Her departure enabled me to sink into the armchair in which, had she remained, she would unquestionably have parked herself indefinitely. I flung myself on the cushioned seat and emitted a woof that came straight from the heart. "So, that's that, Jeeves." "Yes, sir. Once again your swift thinking has averted disaster as it loomed." "It's very kind of you to say so, sir." "Not kind, Jeeves. I'm merely saying what any thinking man would say." I didn't chip in while Aunt Dahlia was speaking, for I saw that she wished to have the floor, but you may take it that I was silently subscribing to every sentiment she uttered. "You stand alone, Jeeves. What size hat do you take?" "A number 8, sir." "I should have thought larger, 11 or 12. I helped myself to a spot of brandy, and sat rolling it round my tongue luxuriantly. It was delightful to relax after the strain and stress I'd been through. "Well, Jeeves, the going's been pretty rough, what?" "Extremely, sir. One begins to get some idea of how the skipper of the Hesperus's little daughter must have felt. Still, I suppose these tests and trials are good for the character?" "No doubt, sir." "Strengthening?" "Yes, sir." "However, I can't say I'm sorry it's all over. Enough is always enough, and it is all over, one feels. Even this sinister house can surely have no further shocks to offer?" "I imagine not, sir." "No, this is the finish. Totley Towers has shot its bolt, and at long last we are sitting pretty. Gratifying, Jeeves?" "Most gratifying, sir." "You bet it is. Carry on with the packing. I want to get it done and go to bed." He opened the small suitcase, and I lit a cigarette and proceeded to stress the moral lesson to be learned from all this ranny-gazoo. Yes, Jeeves, gratifying is the word. A short while ago the air was congested with V-shaped depressions, but now one looks north, south, east, and west, and descries not a single cloud on the horizon. Except the fact that Gussie's wedding is still off, and, well, that can't be helped. Well, this should certainly teach us, should it not, never to repine, never to despair, never to allow the upper lip to unstiffen, but always to remember that no matter how dark the skies may be, the sun is shining somewhere, and will eventually come shining through. I paused. I perceived that I was not securing his attention. He was looking down with an intent, thoughtful expression on his face. "Something the matter, Jeeves?" "Sir?" "You appear preoccupied." "Yes, sir. I've just discovered that there is a policeman's helmet in this suitcase." Chapter 13. I'd been right about the strengthening effect on the character of the vicissitudes to which I'd been subjected since clocking in at the country residence of Sir Watkin Bassett. Little by little, bit by bit, they'd been moulding me, turning me from a sensitive clubman and boulevardier to a man of chill steel. A novice to conditions in this pest house, abruptly handed the news item which I'd just been handed, would, I imagine, have rolled up the eyeballs and swooned where he sat. But I, toughened and fortified by the routine of one damn thing after another, which constituted life at Totley Towers, was enabled to keep my head and face the issue. I don't say I didn't leave my chair like a jackrabbit that sat on a cactus, but having risen, I wasted no time in fruitless twitterings. I went to the door and locked it. Then, tight-lipped and pale, I came back to Jeeves, who had now taken the helmet from the suitcase and was oscillating it meditatively by its strap. His first word showed me that he'd got the wrong angle on the situation. "It would have been wiser, sir," he said with faint reproach, "to have selected some more adequate hiding-place." I shook my head. I may even have smiled wanly, of course. My swift intelligence had enabled me to probe to the bottom of this thing. "Not me, Jeeves. Stiffy. Sir, the hand that placed that helmet there wasn't mine, but that of S. Bing. She had it in her room. She feared lest a search might be instituted, and when I last saw her, was trying to think of a safer spot. This is her idea of one." I sighed. "How do you imagine a girl gets a mind like Stiffy's, Jeeves?" "Certainly the young lady is somewhat eccentric in her actions, sir." Eccentric? She could step straight into Colney Hatch and no questions asked. They'd lay down the red carpet for her. The more the thoughts dwell on that young shrimp, the more the soul sickens in horror. One peers into the future and shudders at what one sees there. One has to face it, Jeeves. Stiffy, who is pure padded cell from the foundations up, is about to marry the Rev. H.P. Pinker, himself about as pronounced a goop as ever broke bread. And there's no reason to suppose, one has to face this too, that their union won't be blessed. There will, that is to say, ere long be little feet pattering about the home. And what one asks oneself is, just how safe will human life be in the vicinity of those feet, assuming, as one is forced to assume, that they will inherit the combined lupiness of two such parents? It is with a sort of tender pity, Jeeves, that I think of the nurses, the governesses, the private schoolmasters, and the public schoolmasters, who will lightly take on the responsibility of looking after a blend of Stephanie Bing and Harold Pinker, little knowing that they're coming up against something hotter than mustard. However, I went on, abandoning these speculations, all this, though of absorbing interest, is not really germane to the issue. Contemplating that helmet and bearing in mind the fact that the Oates-Bassett comedy duo will be arriving at any moment to start their search, what would you recommend? It's a little difficult to say, sir. A really effective hiding place for so bulky an object does not readily present itself. No, the damn thing seems to fill the room, doesn't it? It unquestionably takes the eye, sir. Yes, the authorities wrought well when they shaped this helmet for Constable Oates. They aimed to finish him off impressively, not to give him something which would balance on top of his head like a peanut, and they succeeded. You couldn't hide a lid like this in an impenetrable jungle. "Oh, well," I said, "we will just have to see what tact and suavity will do. I wonder when these birds are going to arrive. I suppose we may expect them very shortly. Ah, that would be the hand of doom now, if I mistake not, Jeeves." But in assuming that the knocker who had just knocked on the door was Sir Watkin, I had erred. It was Stiffy's voice that spoke. "Bertie, let me in." There was nobody I was more anxious to see, but I didn't immediately fling wide the gates. Prudence dictated a preliminary inquiry. "Have you got that bally dog of yours with you?" "No, he's being aired by the butler." "In that case, you may enter." When she did so, it was to find Bertram confronting her with folded arms and a hard look. She appeared, however, not to note my forbidding exterior. "Bertie, darling—" She broke off, checked by a fairly animal snarl from the Wooster lips. "Not so much of the Bertie, darling. I have just one thing to say to you, young Stiffy, and it's this. Was it you who put that helmet in my suitcase?"
Of course it was. That's what I was coming to talk to you about. You remember I was trying to think of a good place? I racked the brain quite a bit, and then suddenly I got it. And now I've got it. The acidity of my tone seemed to surprise her. She regarded me with girlish wonder, the wide-eyed kind. But you don't mind, do you, Bertie, darling? Ha! But why? I thought you'd be so glad to help me out. Oh, yes, I said, and I meant it to sting. I couldn't risk having Uncle Watkin find it in my room. You prefer to have him find it in mine. But how can he? He can't come searching your room. He can't, eh? Of course not. You're his guest. And you suppose that that will cause him to hold his hand? I smiled, one of those bitter, sardonic smiles. I think you're attributing to the old poison germ a niceness of feeling and a respect for the laws of hospitality which nothing in his record suggests that he possesses. You can take it from me that he definitely is going to search the room, and I imagine that the only reason he hasn't arrived already is that he's still scouring the house for Gussie. Gussie? He is, at the moment, chasing Gussie with a hunting crop, but a man can't go on doing that indefinitely. Sooner or later he'll give it up, and then we shall have him here, complete with magnifying glass and bloodhounds. The gravity of the situation had at last impressed itself upon her. She uttered a squeak of dismay, and her eyes became a bit soup-platey. "Oh, Bertie, then I'm afraid I've put you in rather a spot." "That covers the facts like a dust-sheet." "I'm sorry now I ever asked Harold to pinch the thing. It was a mistake, I admit it. Still, after all, even if Uncle Watkin does come here and find it, it doesn't matter much, does it?" "Did you hear that, Jeeves?" "Yes, sir." "So did I." "I see. It doesn't matter, you feel." "Well, what I mean is your reputation won't really suffer much, will it? Everybody knows that you can't keep your hands off policemen's helmets. This'll just be another one." "Ha! And what leads you to suppose, young stiffy, that when the Assyrian comes down like a wolf on the fold, I shall meekly assume the guilt and not blazon the truth?" "What, Jeeves?" "Forth to the world, sir." "Thank you, Jeeves. What makes you suppose that I shall meekly assume the guilt and not blazon the truth forth to the world?" I wouldn't have supposed that her eyes could have widened any more, but they did, perceptibly. Another dismayed squeak escaped her. Indeed, such was its volume that it might perhaps be better to call it a squeal. "But, Bertie—" "Well?" "Bertie, listen." "I'm listening." "Surely you'll take the rap. You can't let Harold get it in the neck. You were telling me this afternoon that he'd be unfrocked." "I won't have him unfrocked." "Where's he going to get if they unfrock him? That sort of thing gives a curate a frightful black eye. Why can't you say you did it? All it would mean is that you'd be kicked out of the house, and I don't suppose you're so anxious to stay on, are you? Possibly you're not aware that your bally uncle is proposing to send the perpetrator of this outrage to Chokey." "Oh, no, at the worst, just a fine." "Nothing of the kind. He specifically told me Chokey." "He didn't mean it. I expect there was—" "No, there was not a twinkle in his eye." "Then that settles it. I can't have my precious angel Harold doing a stretch. How about your precious angel Bertram?" "But Harold's sensitive." "So am I sensitive." "Not half so sensitive as Harold. Bertie, surely you aren't going to be difficult about this? You're much too good a sport. Didn't you tell me once that the code of the Woosters was never let a pal down?" She had found the talking point. People who appeal to the code of the Woosters rarely fail to touch a chord in Bertram. My iron front began to crumble. "That's all very fine." "Bertie, darling." "Yes, I know, but dash it all." "Bertie." "Oh, well, you'll take the rap?" "I suppose so." She yodeled ecstatically, and I think that if I hadn't sidestepped, she would have flung her arms about my neck. Certainly she came leaping forward with some such purpose apparently in view. Foiled by my agility, she began to tear off a few steps of that spring dance to which she was so addicted. "Thank you, Bertie, darling. I knew you'd be sweet about it. I can't tell you how grateful I am and how much I admire you. You remind me of Carter Patterson. No, that's not it. Nick Carter. No, not Nick Carter. Who does Mr. Wooster remind me of, Jeeves? Sidney Carton, miss. That's right, Sidney Carton. But he was small-time stuff compared with you, Bertie. And anyway, I expect we're getting the wind up quite unnecessary. Well, why are we taking it for granted that Uncle Watkin will find the helmet if he comes and searches the room? There are 100 places where you can hide it. And before I could say name 3, she'd pirouetted to the door and pirouetted out. I could hear her dying away in the distance with a song on the lips. My own, as I turned to Jeeves, were twisted in a bitter smile. "Women, Jeeves?" "Yes, sir." "Well, Jeeves," I said, my hand stealing towards the decanter, "this is the end?" "No, sir." I started with a violence that nearly unshipped my front uppers. "Not the end?" "No, sir." "You don't mean you have an idea?" "Yes, sir." "But you told me just now you hadn't." "Yes, sir. But since then I've been giving the matter some thought, and am now in a position to say, Eureka." "Say what?" "Eureka, sir. Like Archimedes." "Did he say Eureka? I thought it was Shakespeare." "No, sir. Archimedes. What I would recommend is that you drop the helmet out of the window. It is most improbable that it will occur to Sir Watkin to search the exterior of the premises, and we shall be able to recover it at our leisure." He paused and stood listening. "Should this suggestion meet with your approval, sir, I feel that a certain haste would be advisable. I fancy I can hear the sound of approaching footsteps." He was right. The air was vibrant with their clumping. Assuming that a herd of bison was not making its way along the second-floor passage of Totley Towers, the enemy were upon us. With the nippiness of a lamb in the fold on observing the approach of Assyrians, I snatched up the helmet, bounded to the window, and loosed the thing into the night. And scarcely had I done so when the door opened, and through it came, in the order named, Aunt Dahlia, wearing an amused and indulgent look as if she were joining in some game to please the children, Pop Bassett, in a purple dressing-gown, and Police Constable Oates, who was dabbing at his nose with a pocket handkerchief. "So sorry to disturb you, Bertie," said the aged relative courteously. "Oh, not at all," I replied with equal suavity. "Is there something I can do for the multitude?" "Sir Watkin has got some extraordinary idea into his head about wanting to search your room." "Search my room?" "I intend to search it from top to bottom," said old Bassett, looking very Bosher Streety. I glanced at Aunt Dahlia, raising the eyebrows. "I don't understand. What's all this about?" She laughed indulgently. "You'll scarcely believe it, Bertie, but he thinks that the cow creamer of his is here." "Is it missing?" "It's been stolen." "You don't say." "Yes." "Well, well, well." "He's very upset about it." "I don't wonder." "Most distressed." "Poor old bloke." I placed a kindly hand on Pop Bassett's shoulder. Probably the wrong thing to do, I can see, looking back, for it didn't soothe. "I can do without your condolences, Mr. Wooster, and I should be glad if you would not refer to me as a bloke. I have every reason to believe that not only is my cow creamer in your possession, but Constable Oates's helmet as well." A cheery guffaw seemed in order. I uttered it. "Ha, ha!" Aunt Dahlia came across with another. "Ha, ha!" "How dashed absurd!" "Perfectly ridiculous." "What on earth would I be doing with cow creamers?" "Or policemen's helmets." "Quite. Do you ever hear such a weird idea?" "Never." "My dear old host," I said, "let us keep perfectly calm and cool and get all this straightened out. In the kindliest spirit, I must point out that you are on the verge, if not slightly past the verge, of making an ass of yourself. This sort of thing won't do, you know. You can't dash about accusing people of nameless crimes without a shadow of evidence." "I have all the evidence I require, Mr. Wooster." "That's what you think, and that, I maintain, is where you're making the floater of a lifetime. When was this modern Dutch gadget of yours abstracted?" He quivered beneath the thrust, pinkening at the tip of the nose. "It is not modern Dutch." "Well, we can thresh that out later. The point is, when did it leave the premises?" "It has not left the premises." "That again is what you think. Well, when was it stolen?" "About 20 minutes ago." "Then there you are. 20 minutes ago I was up here in my room." This rattled him. I'd thought it would. "You're in your room?" "In my room." "Alone?" "On the contrary, Jeeves was there." "Who is Jeeves?" "Don't you know Jeeves?" "This is Jeeves. Jeeves, Sir Watkin Bassett." "And who may you be, my man?" "That's exactly what he is. My man. May I say my right-hand man?" "Thank you, sir." "Not at all, Jeeves. Well-earned tribute." Pop Bassett's face was disfigured, if you could disfigure a face like his, by an ugly sneer. "I regret, Mr. Wooster, that I am not prepared to accept as conclusive evidence of your innocence the unsupported word of your manservant." "Unsupported, eh? Jeeves, go and page Mr. Spode. Tell him I want him to come and put a bit of stuffing into my alibi." "Very good, sir." He shimmered away, and Pop Bassett seemed to swallow something hard and jagged. "Was Roderick Spode with you?" "Certainly he was. Perhaps you'll believe him?" "Yes, I would believe Roderick Spode." "Very well, then. He'll be here in a moment." He appeared to muse. "I see. Well, apparently I was wrong, then, in supposing that you're concealing my cow creamer. It must have been purloined by somebody else." "Outside job, if you ask me," said Aunt Dahlia. "Possibly the work of an international gang?" I hazarded. "Very likely." "I expect it was all over the place that Sir Watkin had bought the thing. You remember Uncle Tom had been counting on getting it, and no doubt he told all sorts of people where it had gone. It wouldn't take long for the news to filter through to the international gangs. They keep their ear to the ground." "Damn clever, those gangs," assented the aged relative. Pop Bassett had seemed to me to wince a trifle at the mention of Uncle Tom's name. Guilty conscience doing its stuff, no doubt, gnawing as these guilty consciences do. "Well, we needn't discuss the matter further," he said. "As regards the cow creamer, I admit that you have established your case. We will now turn to Constable Oates's helmet. That, Mr. Wooster, I happen to know positively is in your possession." "Oh, yes?" "Yes. The constable received specific information on the point from an eyewitness. I will proceed, therefore, to search your room without delay." "You really feel you want to?" "I do." I shrugged the shoulders. "Very well," I said. "Very well. If that is the spirit in which you interpret the duties of a host, carry on. We invite inspection. I can only say that you appear to have extraordinarily rummy views on making your guests comfortable over the weekend. Don't count on my coming here again." I had expressed the opinion to Jeeves that it would be entertaining to stand by and watch this blighter and his colleague ferret about, and so it proved. I don't know when I've extracted more solid amusement from anything. But all these good things have to come to an end at last. About 10 minutes later, it was plain that the bloodhounds were planning to call it off and pack up. To say that Pop Bassett was wry as he desisted from his efforts and turned to me would be to understate it. "I appear to owe you an apology, Mr. Wooster," he said. "Sir W. Bassett," I rejoined, "you never spoke a truer word." And folding my arms and drawing myself up to my full height, I let him have it. The exact words of my harangue have, I'm sorry to say, escaped my memory. It's a pity that there was nobody taking them down in shorthand, for I'm not exaggerating when I say that I surpassed myself. Once or twice, when a bit lit at routs and revels, I've spoken with an eloquence which, rightly or wrongly, has won the plaudits of the Drones Club. But I don't think that I've ever quite reached the level to which I now soared. You could see the stuffing trickling out of old Bassett in great heaping handfuls. But as I rounded into my peroration, I suddenly noticed that I was failing to grip. He'd ceased to listen, and was staring past me at something out of my range of vision. And so worth looking at did this spectacle, judging from his expression, appear to be, that I turned in order to take a deco. It was the butler who had so riveted Sir Watkin Bassett's attention. He was standing in the doorway, holding in his right hand a silver salver. And on that salver was a policeman's helmet. Chapter 14. I remember old Stinker Pinker, who, towards the end of his career at Oxford, used to go in for social service in London's tougher districts, describing to me once in some detail the sensations he had experienced one afternoon, while spreading the light in Bethnal Green, on being unexpectedly kicked in the stomach by a costermonger. It gave him, he told me, a strange, dreamy feeling, together with an odd illusion of having walked into a thick fog. And the reason I mention it is that my own emotions at this moment were extraordinarily similar. When I'd last seen this butler, if you recollect, on the occasion when he'd come to tell me that Madeline Bassett would be glad if I could spare her a moment, I mentioned that he had flickered. It wasn't so much at a flickering butler that I was gazing now as at a sort of heaving mist with a vague suggestion of something butlerine vibrating inside it. Then the scales fell from my eyes, and I was enabled to note the reactions of the rest of the company. They were all taking it extremely big. Pop Bassett, like the chap in the poem, which I had to write out 50 times at school for introducing a white mouse into the English literature hour, was plainly feeling like some watcher of the skies when a new planet swims into his ken, while Aunt Dahlia and Constable Oates resembled, respectively, stout Cortes staring at the Pacific, and all his men, looking at each other with a wild surmise, silent upon a peak in Darien. It was a goodish while before anybody stirred. Then, with a choking cry like that of a mother spotting her long-lost child in the offing, Constable Oates swooped forward and grabbed the lid, clasping it to his bosom with visible ecstasy. The movement seemed to break the spell. Old Bassett came to life as if someone had pressed a button. "Where did you get that, Butterfield?" "I found it in a flower-bed, Sir Watkin." "In a flower-bed? Odd," I said. "Very strange." "Yes, sir, I was airing Miss Bing's dog, and happening to be passing the side of the house, I observed Mr. Wooster drop something from his window. It fell into the flower-bed beneath, and upon inspection proved to be this helmet." Old Bassett drew a deep breath. "Thank you, Butterfield." The butler breezed off, and old B, revolving on his axis, faced me with a gleaming pince-nez. "So," he said. There's never very much you can do in the way of a telling comeback when a fellow says "so" to you. I preserved a judicious silence. "Some mistake," said Aunt Dahlia, taking the floor with an intrepidity which became her well. "Probably came from one of the other windows. Easy to get confused on a dark night. Tcha! Or it may be the man was lying. Yes, that seems a plausible explanation. I think I see it all. This Butterfield of yours is the guilty man. He stole the helmet, and, knowing that the hunt was up and detection imminent, decided to play a bold game and try and shove it off on Bertie. Eh, Bertie?" "I shouldn't wonder, Aunt Dahlia. I shouldn't wonder at all." "Yes, that's what must have happened. Becomes clearer every moment. You can't trust these saintly-looking butlers an inch." "Not an inch." "I remember thinking the fellow had a furtive eye." "Me too." "You noticed it yourself, did you?" "Right away." "He reminds me of Murgatroyd. You remember Murgatroyd at Brinkley, Bertie?" The fellow before Pomeroy's stoutish cove?" "Yes, that's right, with a face like a more than usually respectable archbishop. Took us all in, that face. We trusted him implicitly. What was the result? Fellow pinched a fish slice, put it up the spout, and squandered the proceeds at the dog races. This Butterfield is another Murgatroyd." "Some relation, perhaps?" "I shouldn't be surprised. Well, now that that's all satisfactorily settled and Bertie dismissed without a stain on his character, how about all going to bed? It's getting late, and if I don't have my 8 hours, I'm a rag." She had injected into the proceedings such a pleasant atmosphere of old pals together and hearty "let's say no more about it," that it came quite as a shock to find that old Bassett was failing to see eye to eye. He proceeded immediately to strike the jarring note. "With your theory that somebody's lying, Mrs. Travers, I'm complete agreement. But when you assert that it is my butler, I must join issue with you. Mr. Wooster has been exceedingly clever, most ingenious." "Oh, thanks. but I'm afraid that I find myself unable to dismiss him, as you suggest, without a stain on his character. In fact, to be frank with you, I do not propose to dismiss him at all." He gave me the pince-nez in a cold and menacing manner. I can't remember when I've seen a man I liked the look of less. "You may possibly recall, Mr. Wooster, that in the course of our conversation in my library I informed you that I took the very gravest view of this affair. Your suggestion that I might be content with inflicting a fine of £5, as was the case when you appeared before me at Bosher Street, convicted of a similar outrage, I declared myself unable to accept. I assured you that the perpetrator of this wanton assault on the person of Constable Oates would, when apprehended, serve a prison sentence. I see no reason to revise that decision." This statement had a mixed press. Eustace Oates obviously approved. He looked up from the helmet with a quick, encouraging smile, and, but for the iron restraint of discipline, would, I think, have said, "Hear, hear." Dahlia and I, on the other hand, didn't like it. "Come now, I say, Sir Watkin, really, dash it," she expostulated, always on her toes when the interests of the clan were threatened. "You can't do that sort of thing." "Madam, I both can and will." He twiddled a hand in the direction of Eustace Oates. "Constable?" He didn't add, "Arrest this man," or "Do your duty," but the officer got the gist. He clumped forward zealously. I was rather expecting him to lay a hand on my shoulder or to produce the gyves and apply them to my wrists, but he didn't. He merely lined up beside me as if we were going to do a duet and stood there looking puff-faced. Aunt Dahlia continued to plead and reason. "But you can't invite a man to your house and the moment he steps inside the door calmly bung him into the coop. If that is Gloucestershire hospitality, then heaven help Gloucestershire. Mr. Wooster is not here on my invitation, but on my daughter's. That makes no difference. You can't wriggle out of it like that. He's your guest. He's eaten your salt. And let me tell you, while we're on the subject, that there was a lot too much of it in the soup tonight." "Oh, would you say that?" I said. "Just about right, it seemed to me." "No, too salty." Pop Bassett intervened. "I must apologize for the shortcomings of my cook. I may be making a change before long. And meanwhile, to return to the subject with which we were dealing, Mr. Wooster is under arrest, and tomorrow I shall take the necessary steps to—" "And what's going to happen to him tonight?" "We maintain a small but serviceable police station in the village, presided over by Constable Oates. Oates will doubtless be able to find him accommodation." "You aren't proposing to lug the poor chap off to a police station at this time of night? You could at least let him doss in a decent bed." Yes, I see no objection to that, and does not wish to be unduly harsh. You may remain in this room until tomorrow, Mr. Wooster." "Oh, thanks. I shall lock the door." "Oh, quite." "And take charge of the key." "Oh, rather." "And Constable Oates will patrol beneath the window for the remainder of the night." "Sir?" "This will check Mr. Wooster's known propensity for dropping things from windows. You'd better take up your station at once, Oates." "Very good, sir." There was a note of quiet anguish in the officer's voice, and it was plain that the smug satisfaction with which he'd been watching the progress of events had waned. His views on getting his 8 hours were apparently the same as Aunt Dahlia's. Saluting sadly, he left the room in a depressed sort of way. He had his helmet again, but you could see that he was beginning to ask himself if helmets were everything. "And now, Mrs. Travers, I should like, if I may, to have a word with you in private." They oiled off, and I was alone. I don't mind confessing that my emotions, as the key turned in the lock, were a bit poignant. On the one hand, it was nice to feel that I'd got my bedroom to myself for a few minutes, but against that you had to put the fact that I was in what is known as durance vile, and not likely to get out of it. Of course, this wasn't new stuff to me, for I'd heard the bars clang outside my cell door that time at Bosher Street. But on that occasion I'd been able to buoy myself up with the reflection that the worst the aftermath was likely to provide was a rebuke from the bench, or, as subsequently proved to be the case, a punch in the pocketbook. I wasn't faced, as I was faced now, by the prospect of waking on the morrow to begin serving a sentence of 30 days' duration in a prison where it was most improbable that I'd be able to get my morning cup of tea. Nor did the consciousness that I was innocent seem to help much. I drew no consolation from the fact that Stiffy Bing thought me like Sidney Carton. I'd never met the chap, but I gathered that he was somebody who'd taken it on the chin to oblige a girl, and to my mind this was enough to stamp him as a priceless ass. Sidney Carton and Bertie Wooster, I felt. Nothing to choose between them. Sidney, one of the mugs. Bertram, the same. I went to the window and looked out. Recalling the moody distaste which Constable Oates had exhibited at the suggestion that he should stand guard during the night hours, I had a faint hope that once the eye of authority was removed, he might have ducked the assignment and gone off to get his beauty sleep. But no, there he was, padding up and down on the lawn, the picture of vigilance. And I'd just gone to the washstand to get a cake of soap to bung at him, feeling that this might soothe the bruised spirit a little, when I heard the door-handle rattle. I stepped across and put my lips to the woodwork. "Hello?" "It is I, sir. Jeeves." "Oh, hello, Jeeves." "The door appears to be locked, sir." "And you can take it from me, Jeeves, that appearances do not deceive. Pop Bassett locked it and has trousered the key." "Sir, I've been pinched." "Indeed, sir." "What was that?" "I said, indeed, sir." "Oh, did you?" "Yes. Yes, indeed. And I'll tell you why." I gave him a précis of what had occurred. It wasn't easy to hear, with a door between us, but I think the narrative elicited a spot of respectful tut-tutting. "Unfortunate, sir." "Most. Well, Jeeves, what's your news?" "I endeavoured to locate Mr. Spode, sir, but he'd gone for a walk in the grounds, and no doubt he will be returning shortly." "Well, we shan't require him now. The rapid march of events has taken us far past the point where Spode could have been of service. Anything else been happening at your end?" "I have had a word with Miss Bing, sir." "I should like a word with her myself. What had she to say?" "The young lady was in considerable distress of mind, sir, her union with the Reverend Mr. Pinker having been forbidden by Sir Watkin." "Good Lord, Jeeves, why?" "Sir Watkin appears to have taken umbrage at the part played by Mr. Pinker in allowing the purloiner of the cow-creamer to effect his escape." "Why do you say his?" "From motives of prudence, sir. Walls have ears." "I see what you mean. That's rather neat, Jeeves." "Thank you, sir." I mused a while on this latest development. There were certainly aching hearts in Gloucestershire all right this p.m. I was conscious of a pang of pity. Despite the fact that it was entirely owing to Stiffy that I found myself in my present predic, I wished the young loony well and mourned for her in her hour of disaster. "So he's bunged a spanner into Stiffy's romance as well as Gussie's, has he? That old bird has certainly been throwing his weight about tonight, Jeeves." "Yes, sir." "And not a thing to be done about it, as far as I can see. Can you see anything to be done about it?" "No, sir." "And switching to another aspect of the affair, you haven't any immediate plans for getting me out of this, I suppose?" "Not adequately formulated, sir. I'm turning over an idea in my mind." "Turn well, Jeeves. Spare no effort." "But it is, at present, merely nebulous." "It involves finesse, I presume?" "Yes, sir." I shook my head. Waste of time, really, of course, because he couldn't see me. Still, I shook it. "It's no good trying to be subtle and snaky now, Jeeves. What's required is rapid action. And a thought has occurred to me. We were speaking not long since of the time when Sir Roderick Glossop was immured in the potting shed with Constable Dobson guarding every exit. Do you remember what old Pop Stoker's idea was for coping with the situation?" "If I recollect rightly, sir, Mr. Stoker advocated a physical assault upon the officer. Bat him over the head with a shovel was, as I recall, his expression." "Correct, Jeeves. Those were his exact words. And though we scouted the idea at the time, it seems to me now that he displayed a considerable amount of rugged good sense. These practical, self-made men have a way of going straight to the point and avoiding side issues. Constable Oates is on sentry go beneath my window. I still have the knotted sheets, and they can readily be attached to the leg of the bed or something, so if you just borrow a shovel somewhere and step down— I fear, sir— Come on, Jeeves, this is no time for nulli prosequis. I know you like finesse, but you must see that it won't help us now. The moment has arrived when only shovels can serve. You could go and engage him in conversation, keeping the instrument concealed behind your back, and waiting for the psychological— Excuse me, sir, I think I hear somebody coming. Well, ponder over what I've said. Who's coming? It is Sir Watkin and Mrs. Travers, sir. I fancy they are about to call upon you. I thought I shouldn't get this room to myself for long. Still, let them come. We Woosters keep open house. When the door was unlocked a few moments later, however, only the relative entered. She made for the old familiar armchair and dumped herself heavily in it. Her demeanour was sombre, encouraging no hope that she'd come to announce that Pop Bassett, wiser counsels having prevailed, had decided to let me free. And yet I'm dashed if that wasn't precisely what she'd come to announce. "Well, Bertie," she said, having brooded in silence for a space, "you can get on with your packing." "Eh? He's called it off." "Called it off?" "Yes, he isn't going to press the charge." "You mean I'm not headed for Chokey?" "No." "I'm as free as the air, as the expression is?" "Yes." I was so busy rejoicing in spirit that it was some moments before I had leisure to observe that the buck and wing dance which I was performing was not being abetted by the old flesh and blood. She was still carrying on with her sombre sitting, and I looked at her with a touch of reproach. "You don't seem very pleased." "Oh, I'm delighted." "I fail to detect the symptoms," I said, rather coldly. I should have thought that a nephew's reprieve at the foot of the scaffold, as you might say, would have produced a bit of leaping and springing about. A deep sigh escaped her. "Well, the trouble is, Bertie, there's a catch in it. The old buzzard has made a condition." "What is that?" "He wants Anatole." I stared at her. "Wants Anatole?" "Yes. That's the price of your freedom. He says he'll agree not to press the charge if I let him have Anatole. The darned old blackmailer!" A spasm of anguish twisted her features. It wasn't so very long since she'd been speaking in high terms of blackmail and giving it her hearty approval, but if you want to derive real satisfaction from blackmail, you have to be at the right end of it. Catching it coming, as it were, instead of going, this woman was suffering. I wasn't feeling any too good myself. From time to time in the course of this narrative I have had occasion to indicate my sentiments regarding Anatole, that peerless artist, and you'll remember that the relative's account of how Sir Watkin Bassett had basely tried to snitch him from her employment during his visit to Brinkley Court had shocked me to my foundations. It's difficult, of course, to convey to those who haven't tasted this wizard's products the extraordinary importance which his roasts and boils assume in the scheme of things to those who have. I can only say that once having bitten into one of his dishes, you're left with a feeling that life will be deprived of all its poetry and meaning unless you're in a position to go on digging in. The thought that Aunt Dahlia was prepared to sacrifice this wonder man merely to save a nephew from the cooler was one that struck home and stirred. I don't know when I've been so profoundly moved. It was with a melting eye that I gazed at her. She reminded me of Sidney Carton. "You were actually contemplating giving up Anatole for my sake?" I gasped. "Of course. Of course, jolly well not. I wouldn't hear of such a thing. But you can't go to prison." "I certainly can, if my going means that that supreme maestro will continue working at the old stand. Don't dream of meeting old Bassett's demands." "Bertie, do you mean this?" "I should say so. What's a mere 30 days in the 2nd Division? A bagatelle. I can do it on my head. Let Bassett do his worst, and," I added in a softer voice, "when my time is up, and I come out into the world once more a free man, let Anatole do his best. A month of bread and water, or skilly, or whatever they feed you on in these establishments, will give me a rare appetite. On the night when I emerge, I shall expect a dinner that will live in legend and song. You shall have it. We might be sketching out the details now. No time like the present. Start with caviar or cantaloupe. And cantaloupe, followed by a strengthening soup. Thick or clear? Clear. You aren't forgetting Anatole's velouté au fleur de courgette? Not for a moment. But how about his consommé aux pommes d'amour? Perhaps you're right. I think I am. I feel I am. I'd better leave the ordering to you. It might be wisest. I took pencil and paper, and some 10 minutes later I was in a position to announce the result. This, then, I said, subject to such additions as I may think out in my cell, is the menu as I see it. And I read as follows. Le dîner. Caviar frais, cantaloupe, consommé aux pommes d'amour, sylphide à la crème d'écrevisse, mignonnette de poulet petit duc, point d'asperge à la mistinguette, suprême de foie gras au champagne, neige aux perles des Alpes, timbale de riz de veau toulousaine, salade d'endives et de céleri, le plum pudding, l'étoile au berger, bénédictin blanc, baume nero, friandises, diablotin, fruits. That about covers it, Aunt Dahlia? Yes, you don't seem to have missed out much. Then let's have the man in and defy him. Bassett! I cried. Bassett! Shouted Aunt Dahlia. Bassett! I bawled, making the welkin ring. It was still ringing when he popped in, looking annoyed. What the devil are you shouting at me like that for? Oh, there you are, Bassett. I wasted no time in getting down to the agenda. Bassett, we defy you. The man was plainly taken aback. He threw a questioning look at Aunt Dahlia. He seemed to be feeling that Bertram was speaking in riddles. He's alluding, explained the relative, to that idiotic offer of yours to call the whole thing off if I let you have Anatole. Silliest idea I ever heard. We've been having a good laugh about it, haven't we, Bertie? Roaring our heads off, I assented. He seemed stunned. Do you mean that you refuse? Of course we refuse. I might have known my nephew better than to suppose for an instant that he'd consider bringing sorrow and bereavement to an aunt's home in order to save himself unpleasantness. The Woosters aren't like that, are they, Bertie? I should say not. They don't put self first. You bet they don't. I ought never to have insulted him by mentioning the offer to him. I apologize, Bertie. Quite all right, old flesh and blood. She wrung my hand. Good night, Bertie, and goodbye, or rather, au revoir. We shall meet again. Absolutely, when the fields are white with daisies, if not sooner. By the way, didn't you forget Nona de la Méditerranée au Fenouil? So I did. And Sel d'Agneau au Laitue à la Grecque? Shove them on the charge sheet, will you? Her departure, which was accompanied by a melting glance of admiration and esteem over her shoulder as she navigated across the threshold, was followed by a brief and, on my part, haughty silence. After a while, Pop Bassett spoke in a strained and nasty voice. "Well, Mr. Wooster, it seems that after all you will have to pay the penalty for your folly." "Quite. I may say that I have changed my mind about allowing you to spend the night under my roof. You will go to the police station." "Vindictive, Bassett." "Not at all. I see no reason why Constable Oates should be deprived of his well-earned sleep merely to suit your convenience. I will send for him." He opened the door. "Here, you." It was a most improper way of addressing Jeeves, but the faithful fellow didn't appear to resent it. "Sir?" "On the lawn outside the house you will find Constable Oates. Bring him here." "Very good, sir. I think Mr. Spode wishes to speak to you, sir. Eh? Mr. Spode, sir. He is coming along the passage now. Old Bassett came back into the room, seeming displeased. I wish Roderick wouldn't interrupt me at a time like this, he said querulously. I can't imagine what reason he can have for wanting to see me. I laughed lightly. The irony of the thing amused me. He's coming a bit late to tell you that he was with me when the cow creamer was pinched, thus clearing me of the guilt. I see, yes. As you say, he is somewhat late. I shall have to explain to him. Ah, Roderick. The massive frame of R. Spode had appeared in the doorway. Come in, Roderick, come in. But you needn't have troubled, my dear fellow. Mr. Wooster has made it quite evident that he had nothing to do with the theft of my cow creamer. It was that you wished to see me about, was it not? No, said Roderick Spode. There was an odd, strained look on the man's face. His eyes were glassy, and as far as a thing of that size was capable of being fingered, he was fingering his moustache. He seemed to be bracing himself for some unpleasant task.
Well, no, he said. The fact is, I hear there's been some trouble about the helmet I stole from Constable Oates.
There was a stunned silence. Old Bassett goggled. I goggled. Roderick Spode continued to finger his moustache.
It was a silly thing to do, he said. I see that now. I yielded to an uncontrollable impulse. One does sometimes, doesn't one? You remember I told you I once stole a policeman's helmet at Oxford. I was hoping I could keep quiet about it, but Wooster's man tells me that you've got the idea that Wooster did it, so of course I had to come and tell you. That's all. I think I'll go to bed, said Roderick Spode. Good night.
He edged off, and the stunned silence started functioning again. I suppose there have been men who looked bigger asses than Sir Watkin Bassett at this moment, but I've never seen one myself. The tip of his nose had gone bright scarlet, and his pince-nez were hanging limply to the parent nose at an angle of 45. Consistently though he had snooted me from the very inception of our relations, I felt almost sorry for the poor old blighter. He said at length. He struggled with the vocal cords for a space. They seemed to have gone twisted on him. And it appears that I owe you an apology, Mr. Wooster. Say no more about it, Bassett. I'm sorry that all this has occurred. Don't mention it. My innocence is established. That's all that matters. I presume that I'm now at liberty to depart? Oh, certainly. Good night, Mr. Wooster. Good night, Bassett. I need scarcely say I think that I hope this will be a lesson to you. I dismissed him with a distant nod, and stood there wrapped in thought. I could make nothing of what had occurred. Following the old and tried Oates method of searching for the motive, I had to confess myself baffled. I could only suppose that this was the Sidney Carton spirit bobbing up again. And then a sudden blinding light seemed to flash upon me. Jeeves? Sir. Were you behind this thing? Sir. Don't keep saying sir. You know what I'm talking about. Was it you who egged Spode on to take the rap? I wouldn't say he smiled. He practically never does. But a muscle abaft the mouth did seem to quiver slightly for an instant. I did venture to suggest to Mr. Spode that it would be a graceful act on his part to assume the blame, sir. My line of argument was that he would be saving you a great deal of unpleasantness while running no risk himself. I pointed out to him that Sir Watkin, being engaged to marry his aunt, would hardly be likely to inflict upon him the sentence which he had contemplated inflicting upon you. One does not send gentlemen to prison if one is betrothed to their aunts. Profoundly true, Jeeves. But I still don't get it. Do you mean he just right-hoed without a murmur? Not precisely without a murmur, sir. At first, I must confess, he betrayed a certain reluctance. I think I may have influenced his decision by informing him that I knew all about. I uttered a cry. You, Lily? Yes, sir.
A passionate desire to get to the bottom of this ukulele thing swept over me. Jeeves, tell me, what did Spode actually do to the girl? Murder her? I fear I am not at liberty to say, sir. Come on, Jeeves. I fear not, sir. I gave it up. Oh, well. I started shedding the garments. I climbed into the pyjamas. I slid into bed. The sheets being inextricably knotted, it would be necessary, I saw, to nestle between the blankets, but I was prepared to rough it for one night. The rapid surge of events had left me pensive. I sat with my arms round my knees, meditating on fortune's swift changes. An odd thing, life, Jeeves. Very odd, sir. You never know where you are with it, do you? To take a simple instance, I little thought half an hour ago that I'd be sitting here in carefree pyjamas, watching you pack for the getaway. A very different future seemed to confront me. Yes, sir. One would have said that the curse had come upon me. One would indeed, sir. But now my troubles, as you might say, have vanished like the dew on the what's-it, thanks to you. I'm delighted to have been able to be of service, sir. You have delivered the goods as seldom before, and yet, Jeeves, there is always a snag. Sir, I wish you wouldn't keep saying sir. What I mean is, Jeeves, loving hearts have been sundered in this vicinity, and are still sundered. I may be all right. I am. But Gussie isn't all right, nor is Stiffy all right. That's the fly in the ointment. Yes, sir. Though, pursuant on that, I never could see why flies shouldn't be in the ointment. What harm do they do? I wonder, sir— Yes, Jeeves? I was merely about to inquire if it's your intention to bring an action against Sir Watkin for wrongful arrest and defamation of character before witnesses. I hadn't thought of that. You think an action would lie? There can be no question about it, sir. Both Mrs. Travers and I could offer overwhelming testimony. You are undoubtedly in a position to mulct Sir Watkin in heavy damages. Yes, I suppose you're right. No doubt that was why he went up in the air to such an extent when Spode did his act? Yes, sir. His trained legal mind would have envisaged the peril. I don't think I ever saw a man go so red in the nose. Did you? No, sir. Still, it seems a shame to harry him further. I don't know that I want actually to grind the old bird into the dust. I was merely thinking, sir, that were you to threaten such an action, Sir Watkin, in order to avoid unpleasantness, might see his way to ratifying the betrothals of Miss Bassett and Mr. Finknottle, and Miss Byng and the Reverend Mr. Pinker. Connie, Jeeves, put the bite on him, what? Precisely, sir. The thing shall be put in train immediately. I sprang from the bed and nipped to the door. Bassett! I yelled. There was no immediate response. The man had presumably gone to earth. But after I had persevered for some minutes shouting Bassett at regular intervals with increasing volume, I heard the distant sound of pattering feet, and along he came in a very different spirit from that which he'd exhibited on previous occasions. This time it was more like some eager waiter answering a bell. Yes, Mr. Wooster. I led the way back into the room and hopped into bed again. There's something you wish to say to me, Mr. Wooster? There are about a dozen things I wish to say to you, Bassett, but the one we'll touch on at the moment is this. Are you aware that your headstrong conduct in sticking police officers on to pinch me and locking me in my room has laid you open to an action for, what was it, Jeeves? Wrongful arrest and defamation of character before witnesses, sir. That's the baby. I could soak you for millions. What are you going to do about it? He writhed like an electric fan. I'll tell you what you're going to do about it, I proceeded. You are going to issue your okay on the union of your daughter Madeline and Augustus Finknottle, and also on that of your niece Stephanie and the Rev. H.P. Pinker. And you will do it now. A short struggle seemed to take place in him. It might have lasted longer if he hadn't caught my eye. Very well, Mr. Wooster.
And touching that cow creamer, it's highly probable that the international gang that got away with it will sell it to my Uncle Tom. Their system of underground information will have told them that he's in the market. Not a yip out of you, Bassett, if at some future date you see that cow creamer in his collection. Very well, Mr. Wooster. And one other thing. You owe me a £5. I beg your pardon. In repayment of the one you took off me at Bosher Street. I shall want that before I leave. I will write you a cheque in the morning. I shall expect it on the breakfast tray. Good night, Bassett. Good night, Mr. Wooster. Is that brandy I see over there? I think I should like a glass, if I may. Jeeves, a snootful for Sir Watkin Bassett? Very good, sir. He drained the beaker gratefully and tottered out. Probably quite a nice chap, if you knew him. Jeeves broke the silence. I've finished the packing, sir. Good. Then I think I'll curl up. Open the window, will you? Very good, sir. What sort of a night is it? Unsettled, sir. It has begun to rain with some violence. The sound of a sneeze came to my ears. Hello? Who's that, Jeeves? Somebody out there? Constable Oates, sir. You don't mean he hasn't gone off duty? No, sir. I imagine that in his preoccupation with other matters, it escaped Sir Watkin's mind to send word to him that there was no longer any necessity to keep his vigil. I sighed contentedly. It needed but this to complete my day. The thought of Constable Oates prowling in the rain like the troops of Midian, when he could have been snug in bed toasting his pink toes on the hot water bottle, gave me a curiously mellowing sense of happiness. This is the end of a perfect day, Jeeves. What's that thing of yours about larks? Sir, and I rather think snails? Oh, yes, sir. The years at the spring, the days at the morn, mornings at 7, the hillsides dew-pearled. But the larks, Jeeves, the snails. I'm pretty sure larks and snails enter into it. I'm coming to the larks and snails, sir. The larks on the wing, the snails on the thorn. Now you're talking. And the tabline? God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. That's it in a nutshell. I couldn't have put it better myself. And yet, Jeeves, there is just one thing. I do wish you'd give me the inside facts about Eulalie. I fear, sir, I'd keep it dark. You know me, the silent tomb. The rules of the Junior Ganymede are extremely strict, sir. I know, but you might stretch a point? I'm sorry, sir. I made the great decision. Jeeves, I said, give me the lowdown, and I'll come on that world cruise of yours. He wavered. Well, in the strictest confidence, sir, of course. Mr. Spode designs ladies' underclothing, sir. He has a considerable talent in that direction, and has indulged it secretly for some years. He is the founder and proprietor of the emporium in Bond Street known as Eulalie, sir. You don't mean that? Yes, sir. Good Lord, Jeeves! No wonder he didn't want a thing like that to come out. No, sir. It would unquestionably jeopardize his authority over his followers. You can't be a successful dictator and design women's underclothing. No, sir. One or the other, not both. Precisely, sir. I mused. Well, it was worth it, Jeeves. I couldn't have slept wondering about it. Perhaps that cruise won't be so very foul, after all. Most gentlemen find them enjoyable, sir. Do they? Yes, sir. Seeing new faces? That's true. I hadn't thought of that. The faces will be new, won't they? Thousands and thousands of people, but no stiffy. Exactly, sir. You'd better get the tickets tomorrow. I have already procured them, sir. Good night, sir. The door closed. I switched off the light. For some moments I lay there listening to the measured tramp of Constable Oates's feet, and thinking of Gussie, and Madeline Bassett, and of Stiffy, and old Stinker Pinker, and of the hotsy-totsiness which now prevailed in their love lives.
I also thought of Uncle Tom being handed the cow creamer, and of Aunt Dahlia seizing the psychological moment and nicking him for a fat cheque for Milady's boudoir. Jeeves was right, I felt. The snail was on the wing, and the lark on the thorn, or rather the other way round, and God was in his heaven, and all right with the world. And presently the eyes closed, the muscles relaxed, the breathing became soft and regular, and sleep, which does something which has slipped my mind to the something sleeve of care, poured over me in a healing wave.
The End. You've been listening to The Code of the Woosters by PG Wodehouse, narrated by Alexander Spencer.